It's a primary election in a non-presidential year, but it's getting a lot of attention. Why California's primary might be a sign of things to come nationally in November.
Every opportunity that we can come up with to help students understand that education is not just about reading a textbook. It should be at least something in service of something bigger.
Building a more civil future, students in the South Bay take a new approach to old lessons on politics and government.
And compounding that is the fact that, as far as I know, and through talking to guys that are still active duty, they do not get issued any sunblock or sun protection.
And new research on the growing risk of skin cancer among military members. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Candidates are trying to get in their final phone calls, commercials, and campaigning. California's primary election is tomorrow. The California Democratic headquarters in Sacramento says it has volunteers ready for what it calls an unprecedented primary election. While party leaders say opposition to President Donald Trump is motivating voters, Republican officials say issues like crime and affordability could give them an edge.
I have never seen this level of activity in a non-presidential year in my 25 years in politics. It is amazing. And I think it's because Donald Trump has energized so many people. And there are so many people who are coming out and engaging in politics and engaging in campaigning for the first time because they so resent and resist his divisive agenda.
California is home to a quarter of the homeless population in the nation. Poverty is the highest in the nation, and people can't afford basic needs like transportation or housing. So that's the argument we're making to Democrats, independents, Republicans, and we really think it's going to be a strong message.
If you plan to vote, it's too late to mail in your ballot, but there will be drop boxes set up across San Diego County starting at 7 a.m. For those who plan to go vote in person, polling locations will close at 8 p.m. Two recent polls in the 49th Congressional District paint different pictures of who's leading in the 16 filled candidates. KPBS reporter Allison St. John says the accuracy of the polls can depend on who paid for them.
Two polls on the 49th congressional race have appeared in this final week before the primary election. The first was a Democratic poll that placed Democrat Mike Levin in the lead with 17%, followed by Republican Diane Harkey. The second poll, published by the San Diego Union-Tribune and Channel 10, showed Harkey leading with 24% and Levin running fourth, behind Democrats Doug Applegate and Sarah Jacobs. Political science professor Carl Lunar of Mesa College says when polls show such divergent results, voters need to pay attention to who has paid for them and take partisan polls with a grain of salt.
When you're looking at how to pay attention to polls, look at who's paying for the poll. If it's a poll that's going out to a lot of different nonpartisan groups, you might credit it more than one that's being funded by a partisan interest, particularly a particular campaign or a party.
The top two vote getters in tomorrow's primary election, regardless of party, will go on to battle it out in November. Both recent polls show Harkey in a position to be one of the top two vote getters. Republican Rocky Chavez, who was leading in the polls a month ago, appears to have dropped behind. But with a margin of error in the polls of 4 or 4.7%, it's impossible to say if one of the three leading Democrats in both polls, Applegate, Levin and Jacobs, could come out in the top two. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
During this election season, KPBS has asked you to show us your mailers. Tonight, we take a look at the candidates for San Diego County Assessor Recorder. KPBS reporter Claire Tragesser breaks down their claims regarding tax breaks for homeowners.
Subscribers to the San Diego Union-Tribune got a little something extra on Sunday, a campaign ad for Matt Strabone, who's running to be the county assessor and recorder. The job involves deciding how much property tax everyone pays, storing the county's public land records, and issuing marriage licenses and birth certificates. I will give 150,000 more homeowners in San Diego County a property tax break, the ad says. While he's not planning on creating a new tax break, Strabone told KPBS those homeowners may not be aware of a tax break called the homeowner's exemption.
Now, the reason why these 150,000 folks don't know about this exemption is because the assessor has never told them it exists. So, excuse me, my plan is to find these people where they are, improve public outreach, reach out to them, let them know they're eligible for this, give them the form, and ensure that these folks are no longer overpaying on their property taxes.
Ernie Dronenberg, the current county assessor and recorder, says not everyone who owns a home qualifies for the exemption.
As a safeguard, periodically we go back and ask these people a second time, are you sure you're not qualified? We do a mailing. Actually, that mailing went out this month to people again saying, and there's about 100,000 people that we have in our files that haven't applied. We believe that maybe 15, maybe 20% of those people may be entitled and they just haven't done it.
Dronenberg sent out his own mailer saying he helped 490,000 homeowners qualify for exemptions. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
Candidates for governor spent time in San Diego today hoping to energize supporters. Republican State Assemblyman Travis Allen visited supporters outside the city administration building downtown. And Democrat Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom met with union workers in the college area. In a little more than 24 hours, the field for governor will be narrowed down to 2. KPBS is part of the California Dream Project, a statewide public media collaboration focusing on quality of life and affordability. We asked the candidates what they would do to strengthen the California dream.
We're going to have to address the fact that early child education, universal preschool, full-day kindergarten, we got to focus a lot more on, poor kids primarily, because everybody around here, our kids are going to be okay.
I have a very simple 5-point plan to take back California. Cut taxes in California, get tough on crime, fix our roads, expand our freeways with no new taxes, fix our broken education system. The last point is to complete the California Sweetwater project.
We're not addressing the root cause of the problem. The number one predictor of whether or not you're going to end up in the criminal justice system is the number of words you speak in kindergarten. As someone that did universal preschool in the middle of a recession and has promoted universal preschool in this state, in many respects, that intervention comes too late. Prenatal care, 0 to 3. Nurse home visits, first-time mothers, the imperative of talking to your kids, reading to your kids, and having an engagement that is systemic, that is organized and deliberative and resource, I think is the most profound thing we can do to change the trajectory.
One of the things we have to celebrate, but also understand the opportunities, some would label them challenges, is we need to make sure regardless of circumstance, regardless of background, regardless of income, every child needs to get a world-class education. One of the things I would push aggressively is investment in education.
Education, by the way, is the best crime prevention program and the best economic development program. So at the end of the day, we are 41st in per pupil spending, and we are #1 in per prisoner. So you restore the California dream by getting your priorities straight.
The cost of housing is probably the largest single element of any family's budget. And so if the cost of housing is higher, it's more likely that that person has difficulty meeting other expenses, which means, again, they're put into poverty. Circling back, it circles back to that regulation that drove up the cost of housing or resulted in it being a problem for a family.
Our election coverage continues online at kpbs.org/election. We will also have a special live coverage of election results Tuesday night at 10. San Diego Gas and Electric is making a new investment in how it stores its energy, including renewables. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The utility-scale battery projects will help the local power company manage the electric grid as more renewable energy comes online. Now, the projects are going to add 83.5 megawatts of storage capacity. San Diego Gas and Electric Scott Drury says that'll boost the utility's system-wide storage to 200 megawatts.
We're one of the leaders in the delivery of clean, renewable energy today to our customers in San Diego Gas and Electric at nearly 44%. And so as the level of renewable energies integrated into the grid increase, the role of energy storage becomes increasingly important.
Now, these large batteries can store energy during the day when renewable power is plentiful and use that energy after the sun sets. California regulators are requiring utilities to invest in energy storage. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, what's behind the Supreme Court decision in favor of a baker who refused to make a cake for a same-sex couple? Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
For thousands of women, a breast cancer diagnosis leads to months of grueling chemotherapy. But new research shows the treatment might not be necessary. AP reporter Kathy Young has the story.
Adine Usher has dedicated her life to helping students with physical disabilities. She also became an advocate for women's health after a routine mammogram told her everything was okay.
The density of my breasts was masking the presence of not one, not two, but 3 tumors.
After surgery to remove the breast, Dr. Joseph Sperano encouraged her to join a study he was leading to see which patients benefit from chemotherapy and which ones do not.
10 years ago, she clearly would have met every criteria for recommending chemotherapy. Today, based on the trial results, she clearly doesn't need chemotherapy.
The landmark study funded by the National Cancer Institute and some breast cancer foundations finds that most women with early-stage breast cancer that has not spread and whose growth is fueled by hormones can skip chemotherapy without hurting their chances of survival. Patients still need surgery and hormone therapy, but the question is whether they also need chemo.
We were able to identify that about 70% of patients who we would normally recommend chemotherapy to don't benefit from it, don't need it.
Researchers use genetic testing to gauge each patient's risk of cancer recurrence. Those at high risk got chemo, those at low risk didn't. Women in the middle at intermediate risk got standard hormone therapy, and half also got chemo. 9 years later, 94% in the intermediate risk group were still alive, and chemo made no difference in the odds.
It allows us to treat who really needs to be treated. It thus greatly reduces the amount of overtreatment.
The study is expected to spare up to 70,000 patients a year in the United States the ordeal and expense of chemotherapy.
Being able to say to a patient that truly there's no benefit for chemotherapy in your case, based on a test of your cancer, that's a very powerful intervention. It allows everyone to feel very confident and reassured about the decisions they're making.
Usher has been cancer-free for 10 years now.
I was excited to have been in a study that is such an important study.
Experts believe the results will have an immediate impact on breast cancer treatment for years to come. Kathy Young, Associated Press.
Scientific evidence continues to show military troops are at higher risk to develop skin cancer. New research looks at all of the risk factors. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
That's the deadly form of skin cancer, the melanoma.
The elevated risk for cancer among the military has been known for a while, but a new study shows the extent. Dr. William Goff is a board-certified dermatologist.
This is the Marine Corps F-18 squadron I was fortunate enough to be stationed with.
He also spent 11 years in the Navy as a flight surgeon.
The scary thing is that even in the normal non-military population, the risk of skin cancer is 1 out of every 5. So 1 out of every 5 individuals will get a skin cancer in their life. And, we can't forget that the most deadly form of skin cancer, melanoma, 1 person dies every hour from melanoma.
For the military, add tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, sailors serving long deployments at sea. Though studies found the Air Force is actually the most vulnerable. Groff attributes that to pilots at high altitude. The study also suggests that exhaust from jet engines may be a factor in future skin cancers. Groff also blames the lack of a consistent policy to protect troops from sun damage.
Compounding that is the fact that as far as I know, and through talking to guys that are still active duty, they do not get issued any sunblock or sun protections.
He says troops often buy their own sunscreen or rely on care packages from home. Uniforms also aren't always designed to cover vulnerable areas like forearms and the head and the back of the neck. If you're a veteran who's been exposed, he says see a doctor. White males over 50 are at the highest risk.
But if you can't right away, take a picture with your phone, save it, and then maybe take a picture a few weeks, a couple months later, and see if there's any change.
The research is published in the June issue of the Journal of American Academy of Dermatology. The authors suggest more research is needed into factors beyond the sun, like exposure to certain chemicals and equipment used by the Navy. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Plenty of sunshine to start the week and an extreme heat warning in our desert communities. Erin Calandra has details in tonight's forecast.
Well, happy Monday to you. I hope the work week started off on a good foot. And let's take a look at what's going on because it is extremely hot in the eastern part of the county. We do expect to see some excessive heat warnings in place here until 8 p.m. tonight. That does include Borrego Springs. We're seeing temperatures soaring around 112 degrees in spots. That's about 10 degrees warmer than it should be this time of year. So certainly dangerous. Make sure you're checking on your elderly neighbors and also make sure your pets and your infants are staying well hydrated and also cool. Let's take a look at the satellite. Not much going on across the county as far as precipitation. We're under the influence of a high pressure system, so it's staying nice and dry and awfully warm. Now along the coast, we do have this nice cool flow coming in off the Pacific. So those beach communities here, it's feeling pretty nice, actually. If you're trying to escape the heat, you might want to head to the coast. For tonight, 62 degrees for the overnight low. You'll notice more clouds around, but they'll break up for sunshine by the afternoon tomorrow. So San Diego tonight, 62 for the low. Chula Vista at 61. Mount Laguna dipping down to the 50s. And Borrego Springs staying right around 70 degrees. Now tomorrow, it's not going to be quite as hot in the deserts. Still triple digits, so still dangerously warm. Mount Laguna at 74 degrees and Ramona, 83. Along the coast, very pleasant conditions. San Diego coming in right around 70 degrees. It's going to stay like this really along the coast all week long. We're going to be in the low 70s with sunshine until we get to the weekend. That's when it starts to warm up. Nearly 80 degrees Saturday. In the interior areas, well, it's going to be a bit warmer, of course. In the upper 70s, low 80s. But by Saturday, we really warm up to 87 degrees. Staying sunny and dry. And in the mountains, that's the cool spot. If you want to stay cool, head to the mountains. Temperatures in those low 70s all week until the weekend. Again, there's a pattern here. It's getting a bit warmer up into the 80s. And in the deserts, yikes, triple digits every single day. Again, make sure you are staying healthy and hydrated and check on those elderly neighbors and also keep those pets in mind. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
After local schools lost out on nearly $1 million for homeless students, one local congressman has tried to secure the money, but those efforts have failed. iNewsSource reporter Megan Woods has details.
The saga over homeless student funding at San Diego Unified began last month when iNewsSource learned the district's application for a federal grant was rejected because of a missing signature. San Diego Democrat Scott Peters asked the state superintendent to reconsider, but Superintendent Tom Torlakson told Peters in a letter that the state education department does not receive enough federal money now to support all of the districts that apply. He added that he would welcome any help from Peters to get the state more money. Of the 128 applications for homeless student funding the state received, 15 were disqualified, including San Diego Unified's. 3 San Diego County districts will be getting some of the federal dollars: San Ysidro, Poway, and Escondido Union. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Megan Wood.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. Students are being asked to play a bigger role in reporting suspicious activity on campus.
Now raise your right hand and repeat after me. If I see something, I will say something.
If I see something,
I will say something. If I see something, I will say something.
That's part of a new awareness campaign from the San Diego Unified School District. Cox Communications will air the public service announcements. Students from Point Loma and San Diego High Schools were on the project with Crime Stoppers. The students behind the March for Our Lives will hit the road this summer. Organizers of the multi-state bus tour say they plan to engage young people in the political process and encourage them to vote. Many of the student activists from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School graduated yesterday. The bus tour will include California. Details on any stops in San Diego have not been announced. Between attack ads and misleading mailers, elections don't always bring out the best in adults. But the next generation might do a bit better. KPBS education reporter Megan Burke says civics education is changing to build more of a civil future.
She came out of her office and she was like, "Oh, hi, this is so awesome."
Sequoia Chris recounts a meeting she and her classmate Francisco Nodal had with Chula Vista Mayor Mary Salas.
She was just a down-to-earth woman that was here to talk to a few freshman kids about trying to solve a problem that is nationwide.
The problem, gender inequality in politics. Their chat was part of an assignment that challenged students throughout the Sweetwater Union High School District to research a problem, talk to stakeholders, and brainstorm solutions. Other students looked into voter turnout, high school dropout rates, and militarized law enforcement. This is what geography looks like in the South Bay now.
I thought I was signing up for the required class and we were just going to learn about the world and land and determining how big a landscape would be or simple stuff like that. So I wasn't really excited because I like ideas more like this.
Really, you can look at anything and approach it in a geographic way.
Kelly Leone is Chris's teacher at Bonita Vista High School. Her class is called Human Geography and looks at the interplay between places and social systems.
So just thinking about in a society like the United States, we think of ourselves as advanced, but when we look at an issue like gender equality in representing us in the political process, we're not as advanced as some other countries are.
The class also looks at industry, food systems, economies, but Leone says her goal is to get students thinking about geography through their own lens.
Every opportunity that we can come up with to help students understand that education is not just about reading a textbook, it should be at least something in service of something bigger. And that something bigger should be looking at the problems that we have in our community, looking at the problems we have in our world, and figuring out ways that we can impact them or solve them.
Leone isn't the only San Diego educator thinking this way. Many other schools in the county have implemented these kinds of service learning projects. But in 2016, the California Department of Education adopted a new history and social science framework that asks every campus to take this approach. Frameworks are official guidance for teachers on how to best help students meet the state's academic standards. San Diego State professor Thomas Herman directs the California Geographic Alliance and is helping with the rollout.
There's a big focus on authentic learning, on not studying the same questions that Napoleon and Churchill considered, but questions that ninth graders in Chula Vista might actually have. So asking those kinds of questions. But then also learning from that question forward. So inquiry-based instruction, so that you're really helping students to identify their own meaningful questions and then pursue knowledge that will help them to answer those questions.
The framework urges teachers to go even further by providing opportunities for students to take action. Leone and her colleagues in Sweetwater hosted a conference where students shared their ideas. Herman defended this approach over traditional textbook learning.
Students are accumulating knowledge that's relevant to the world today, not relevant to the developmental stages that the world has gone through. And I think there aren't many people who would spend much time arguing that the world is fundamentally the same now as it was in 1850, or that it was in 1650 or 1492. So having people continue to learn through those stages of the past, and then at the end of their education, they've just been brought up to present, it's not very helpful when we have pressing issues and challenges that we'd really like our young people to be working on as soon as possible.
There are similar threads in Common Core standards and the nation's relatively new science standards. The result is that civics is sprinkled throughout the curriculum and goes beyond the branches of government. Again, Leone.
Investigating our world, whether that be the global world or just our community in general, recognizing the perspectives of others, communicating ideas appropriately depending on the audience, and then finally actually doing something with that information and acting on it. That's what democracy is all about, right? And that's what we want our students to do when they go off into the world.
Chris said her 9th grade geography project on gender inequality has already given her some ideas about making clubs on campus more inclusive. But what about on a larger scale? Would she and her classmates call on change from elected officials like Mary Salas?
Yeah, I think we will, because finding out that she's so easy to contact and sit down with and easy to talk to, that gives me, and I believe Frankie too, hope that if we really wanted to change something around the world, we could move forward and contact the senators of California or the House of Representatives or the United States, like just reach out to people.
Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Here is a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, sleeker, faster, better. Apple CEO Tim Cook talks about the hot gadgets and apps featured at this year's developer conference. And on Midday Edition, engineering selfish genes in mice. We explore the benefits and risks tomorrow on KPBS Radio. And a reminder that KPBS will have a special coverage of the primary election tomorrow night. We will have results, interviews, and analysis live at 10 p.m. You can also follow our coverage and find the KPBS Voters Guide at kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.